Welcome back to the channel. This video is about setting up a navbar with Hugo and also setting it up so that you can use drop-downs. If you're new to Hugo or web design in general, I recommend you check out my standard Bootstrap navbar video. I've left a link to that above. Otherwise, let's get started with this intermediate video. To get started with this video, you'll need to have the latest version of Hugo and Visual Studio Code set up. I've got a link above for my video on installing Hugo and all its required dependencies. After completing this video, you'll be able to configure menus in front matter and also in config files. You'll be able to iterate over menus using range in templates. You'll be able to check if a menu item has children with the .hasChildren variable. And you'll be able to check if a menu link is active with .isMenuCurrent. We'll also be able to check if a drop-down contains an active link with .hasMenuCurrent. I've put all the code that you'll need for the project in a GitHub repository. I've left a link for this repository in the description below. Once you've loaded up the page, you can click on the green code button and download a zip file. Alternatively, you could clone the Git repository. Make sure you click on the star button, and you're welcome to also use this for any other Hugo project requirements. Before we continue, a quick message from this video's sponsor. As a Skillshare teacher, I've partnered up with them to offer you a free 1-month trial using my link below. I personally produce full-length Hugo courses on Skillshare on a variety of topics, and there are many other great teachers on Skillshare ready to help you level up your skills for your next big project. Click on the link below for the free 1-month trial. You can cancel at any time. So I've opened up the project in Visual Studio Code. The first thing we'll do is we'll have a look at how the 2 pages that are already present have been configured to use menus. So if you open up either of the pages, you'll see there's a configuration item for menu. And we've also got the title, which will appear in the menu, and the weight. And that's the most basic way to specify a menu configuration. Also in the About page, we've got the title of the page, which is required. And we've also got, we're defining menu of main and weight. We'll then go into layouts and partials and header. And you'll notice we've got a navbar already set up. What we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste in the code from the Bootstrap website to start from scratch, and then we'll set it up for both standard menu items and drop downs. So I'll leave the link in the description below for the Bootstrap docs page for the navbar. It's version 5.2, and that's the version that's actually been set up in the template. There is version 5.3 coming out soon. But you'd have to make sure that you update the CSS and the JavaScript in your template file that you're working with, and I'll show you that in a moment. So we'll just scroll down and we'll grab a copy of this first example that has a drop down and a divider. We're not going to worry about the disabled links, but I will leave a copy of some code if you wish to implement that. I personally have never actually used it. So we'll copy all of this code, and then we'll paste it in over what we've already got. Then what we'll do is we'll work out what's what. So we've got inside here all of our different menu items. I'm just going to separate them. You've then got the drop down there, and inside the drop down we have some menu items and a divider. We've also got a disabled item here, which I'm going to delete. And I'm going to remove 2 of these. So we've got a few different variations. We've got a divider in the drop down. We've got a standard menu item in the drop down. And then we've got an active link, which isn't a drop down, and a standard link, which isn't a drop down. The first thing we'll do is we'll set up the menu so that it ranges over the main menu that's been set up with 2 pages so far. So I've also linked this page, and it's the Hugo Docs page for menu templates. The main thing we'll worry about on this page is looking at how to loop over a menu. Now there's a variable .site.menus, and then from there you can specify the menu name, and we're looking at the main menu. So we're going to range, and range is all about looping or iterating, and that means we can work on the menu 1 step at a time, 1 item at a time. So we can copy that in. So we'll paste that in inside the unordered list, and then we'll scroll down before the closing tag of the unordered list, and then we'll paste it in an end tag. So what will happen now is for every single menu item, the code between the opening and closing range tags will be printed. So now I've got to look into the different properties that are available as part of that menu so we can start printing out menu information. And I've linked this page as well in the description, and on this page we've got all the different properties that are available once you're ranging over a menu. Now we'll go back to the previous page because there's a bit of an example there of how to use it. It doesn't work directly with our Bootstrap template, but we can get a lot of information out of it. We're going to skip the if.hasChildren check first. That's for dropdowns. We'll just go into the else for now. And you'll notice there's some properties here that we'll use. First one we'll look at is URL, and then we'll look at pre, name, and also post. If you go into the properties, you'll see pre and post. They're keys you can set in the config, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. Then we can put, say for example, an icon before or after the actual menu item. Not something I use very often, but it's definitely worth putting in your template so it can be accessed if you need it. So we'll ignore the current page one for a moment and we'll go down to the standard link. We'll paste in the href, and then we'll copy the pre and name and we'll add post after it. You'll notice there's a span around the name, and that's so you can target the name separate to the pre and post. We'll copy that. So where it says link, we'll paste that in and we'll get rid of all the spaces and we'll get onto one line. And then before the closing a tag, we'll put in .post. And then we'll save that and we'll run the Hugo server. I've actually set up some npm scripts for you. You must have Hugo installed globally for this to work, which is a standard Hugo install, but there is a dev script you can run. You can hit the play button as long as you've got node.js installed, and your Hugo dev server will start. You can then control click on the link to open up the dev server in a new tab. So it does look a bit messy, but what you can get out of this is we've got the home in between home and description coming up from our menu, and we've also got the about between home and description coming up. The reason home and description have been duplicated is because there's two menu items and we've iterated over that code twice. In a moment we're going to go and remove those duplicates and set them up properly. You'll also notice that the home that's been generated is a standard link, whereas the existing home is an active link. So we're going to fix up our home right now so that it displays as an active link. So it gives the user a bit of a hint as to where they're at. So to set up the active link, if you scroll down the bottom of the menu variables page, we've got some functions here, and we've got isMenuCurrent and hasMenuCurrent. HasMenuCurrent is to work out if a dropdown contains an active link. But what we're worried about right now is isMenuCurrent, and that's a direct check if the menu link matches the current page. So go back to our example page. There's a bit of an example here in the children, and I'll scroll it across, and they've used isMenuCurrent there, and they're checking for main menu, and we're going to just change that a little bit because you don't need to use that current page variable that they've set up here. We can make our code a little bit shorter. So we'll copy that tag, Hugo tag, and then what you have to do is work out what the difference is between our active menu and our standard menu. And you'll notice we've got the active class. We've also got this ARIA current page information, and that's for assistive technologies. What you can do is everything from the A in active all the way to the E in page, if you delete that, you'll notice that it's now the same. So what we'll do is down on this bottom one, we'll put that code in to check if this link is a current active link for the main menu. We can actually take out the current page because If we just use the $sign looks to the top level of this page. It overrides what's happening in this range. The thing with Hugo, and it's quite confusing for people who've just started with Hugo, is context. Inside this range, the dot in the dot is menu current is talking about the current menu item that we're working on. Just like we've used .pre, .name, .url. But we don't want to work on that. We want to work on the actual menu itself, which starts back here. So we want to access is menu current and pass in main menu to it. So that's why we use the $sign. The $sign will override the range and it will get us back to here above the range. I'll just show you the example that they've done on the Hugo page and you'll see how that works. So back on the example, before they get into the range, they've defined a variable here called current page, and they've set it to the dot, which is just a standard context before we've hit the range. And then they've used it $sign current page. But we're just going to use $sign. It'll get us back to this exact same context here. It'll be equal to the standard dot before we get into the range. So back in here, we'll fix up that tag that's missing. And then what we'll do is we'll put in an end tag. And to start with, we'll put in the active class, but you need to put a space in first, because you'll notice we need to have a space between nav link and active. We don't want that space to be there unnecessarily, only if it's an active link. We'll put that space in, and then we'll copy in the aria current page. We won't put in that last double quote. We'll grab the first one there, part of that active link. So I'll paste that in. Looks a little bit messy, but I gave you the example of how we can delete all of that, including the space before active, just like we've got here. You'll notice Visual Studio Code actually links that up for you, so you can actually check that your code's correct. If you back that out, we're back where we started. So what we'll do is we will delete that menu item there, and we'll get rid of a little bit of space. And then we'll save it and we'll double check it in the browser. So now in the browser, we've got our home working and it's actually an active link, and we've got our about page. We haven't actually set up the dropdowns yet. That's why they're being duplicated. If you right click and inspect, you'll see we've got nav link and active, and also aria current page, which is for our assistive technologies. So the home is looking great. And then we'll go down to our about page and you'll see it's just a standard nav link with the URL. So that's working perfectly. Now we can get onto the dropdown. So where we check if a dropdown is necessary is the .hasChildren property. And we'll do a check with an if. And if it's a dropdown, then we'll put the code in there. And if it's not a dropdown, we'll use an else. And that's where we'll put our standard menu item. So we can go ahead and we can copy the if.hasChildren. And when you start to get too much code on your screen, there's two options you've got. The first one is if you go to view, you can word wrap and it snaps everything around onto new lines. I don't like that when I'm using Hugo templating code because it doesn't always like being on new lines. The other option is Control B or Command B if you're on a Mac, and it will temporarily get rid of that left-hand pane for you. So what we'll do is we'll put in our if.hasChildren, and we'll leave a space, and then we'll put in an else, and then we'll put in end tag. And what we can do with these tags, we can actually put some items on new lines. You generally have got to be very careful about when it comes to Hugo tags. Rule of thumb is generally don't put them on new lines unless you know what you're doing. I would not use a code formatter for this. There is a Hugo code formatter, but even then I'd be very careful. So we'll just put some items on new lines. I'd hit the tab after I go for a new line. A code formatter would probably put every item on a new line. I'm just trying to neaten things up a little bit. So you'll see there how I've got every item on a new line. That's how a code formatter would do it. Let's go through to our A Now we can't put every item on a new line because we've got our Hugo tags there, but that's just going to help get things on the screen a bit clearer. So we'll go down to our drop down, Control X, and we'll paste it into the Has Children section, and then we'll get our standard link that we've already set up, and we'll paste that into the else because it's not a drop down. And then what you can do, if you want, you can highlight all of that code block you just created, and you can tab it in one level if you like. And if you want to keep your HTML lined up, you could bring back the original range. That way your list item is only one indent in from the unordered list. So for the drop down, we've then got to go through and first of all we'll get our pre name and post, and we'll copy that and we'll paste it into the list item. That's for our link, and then we'll get the URL and paste it in for the href. And also for the drop down itself, it also has a name. So we'll grab the pre, post, and name and paste that in there. And then you'll notice we have to range over all of the drop down menu items with .children. So we're going to range over .children because .children will give us a list, or more correctly an array or a slice of all of those children items, and we're going to range over them, loop or iterate. So I'll paste that in on top of our drop down divider and our standard drop down menu item. Then we'll put in an end tag. Before we test that out in the browser, we're going to do a check whether it needs to be a divider or whether it just needs to be a standard drop down item. And like I said in the beginning, I'll leave a different branch on the GitHub repository of the completed code for where you can see how to set up a disabled item, but I'm not going to go through it because it's something that most people won't use. So what we'll do, and I'll show you how to set this up at the end, is we'll check if a parameter has been set. So if eq.params.divider, and we'll check if that's been set to true, and that will give us a divider. Otherwise we'll do else for our standard case, which is a standard menu item, and then we can end that. And like we did before, we can highlight and indent that in one level so it's a bit clearer that it's a new block. And we'll save that and we'll check it in the browser. So our drop down item disappeared because we haven't actually set any up yet. That's great. So far so good. And we'll go back and we'll configure some a drop down and some pages and dividers, and then we'll fix up our active tag. So we'll go into our content and we'll make a new folder called products, and we'll copy and paste in the index.md from home, and then we'll get rid of the heading and the buttons, and we'll also remove it from the menu. We're going to configure this one slightly differently, and I'm not worried about the text because we're actually not going to use this page. Then what we'll do is we'll make a page called bikes, and we'll just copy in our about into there. We'll call it bikes. Give it a weight of 10. And what we're going to do is, that's a really simple configuration for a menu, but we're going to go for a more complex one. So we're going to put menu like that, and then we'll do parent, and the parent will be products. And then we can set a weight there if we like. I'll give it 10. And we'll save that, and we'll copy our bikes folder. We'll call it trucks. We'll change the title. And we'll give it a weight of 20. So now we've got to set up our menu configuration. Go into config.yaml, and we'll add an entry called menu, and then we'll tab in and we'll go to main, put in a dash and a space. And I've linked this page as well. It's the content management page for menus. So we've just looked at the advanced configuration. Now we're looking at adding a non-content entry because we're really not worried about that products page. We're using a drop down to link to all the pages. So we're going to have to set an identifier. And the reason we do an identifier is that's how we set the parent item. So back when we set parent to products, we're going to put products all in lowercase there in the identifier. And then we're going to set the name, and we're going to put a capital P in for products. And that's really helpful if you have a menu item name that's, say, 2 words with a space. You can then set a simple identifier that's 1 word for when you're setting your parent up. So we're going to do identifier and name. We'll call it products, and then name products with capital P. So we'll save that, and then we'll check in the browser, and you'll see we've got our drop down of products, and we've got our 2 products there. So we click on one of them, bikes. You'll notice we haven't got our active link working on either the drop down or the menu item. So we'll go ahead and we'll set that up. But if you go to home or about, you'll notice that the active link is working properly. Just to make it confusing, there's the 2 different ways we have to access this. And for the actual drop down, it's .has menu current. And for the child, it's .is menu current. So let's go back and we'll fix that up. So back in the header, we're going to start off with the drop down itself. So we'll go into our standard menu item and we'll grab all of the code from the .is menu current all the way across to the end tag. We'll copy that, and you'll remember how we went into the end of the class and we paste that in, so we get the RA current in there as well. And then we'll go down into our drop down item and we'll click at the end of the class and we'll paste that in. Now we do have to remove the RA current from the is menu current because that isn't actually a page that actual button links to. There's no actual page link to it at all. It's just checking for a menu item, a child. So we'll get rid of the RA current part of it, and where it says is menu current, we have to change that to has menu current, and that will check if one of these items down here, the children that have been iterated over, it will check if one of those is active. So we'll save that, and I'll just hit Control B to get onto a full screen, and I'll put these items on a new line so it's easier to read if you go and check it out on GitHub, although I'm not going to do any new lines where the Hugo tags are. And I'll do that again for this menu item here. Tab that in. And I'll format the standard one the same for consistency. So save that, we'll have a look in the browser. So now if we go to one of the products, you'll notice that products turns dark. And if you click on it, you'll notice the current page is highlighted. And you can modify this behavior using the SCSS variables. And for a few of them, you have to do a manual CSS override if you don't like the way it looks. And now to set up a divider. So if we look at our bikes, we've got a weight of 10, and then trucks is a weight of 20. We'll change trucks to a weight of 30, so we can add a divider with a weight of 20. We'll go into our config.yaml, and we'll go into our main menu. And we'll give it a parent of products. And then we'll give it a weight of 20, and then params divider we'll set to true, and we'll save that, and we'll have a look in the browser. And there's our divider coming up there with a weight of 20 between bikes weight of 10 and trucks weight of 30. And if you want to set up a disabled state, I'll leave another branch of this repository called disabled state in case you wish to set that up, but like I said, it's something that most people won't use and it's just going to get in the way of your code. And one last thing, if you want to upgrade to Bootstrap 5.3 or any other newer release, you have to go into your header.html, and you'll notice I've pulled in the CSS from a CDN there. That's the easiest way to do it. Currently we're looking at 5.2.3. You'll have to go on the Bootstrap site and upgrade that link, and if you go into your script footer, you'll have to upgrade the JavaScript as well. And for those who are interested, I've left the extra branch called disabled state, and I've put in some extra template logic to add a disabled class and also remove the URL if the params are set to disabled. And the way you do that is when you're configuring your menu, you put in params disabled with a tab and set that to true, and then it will be grayed out and there'll be no link for it, but the page will still work. As you just saw, the page still does exist. That will only work if you get that template logic out of the disabled state branch. So that's it for the video. I've left a link to the files for this tutorial in the description below. There's also the additional branch for the disabled state. If you liked it, remember to hit the thumbs up button. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section below. And please remember to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification button so you're notified of my regular coding tutorials.